Thank you. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. Welcome to What's New in Web UI. I'm Yuna, a Chrome developer relations engineer focused on all things visual on the web platform. So that means CSS, HTML, and JavaScript that helps you build beautiful, engaging web interfaces. We've come a long way in the past 5 years. Incredibly powerful features that we didn't even know we could have in the browser have not only landed, but have also gained cross-browser compatibility at a faster pace than they ever have before. The has parent selector, container queries, color functions, view transitions, nesting, trigonometric functions, scroll-driven animations. It's truly amazing what you can now do with native HTML and CSS. How lucky are we that we get to experience this shift, this golden age of web UI, this really cool era where we get to be web developers. That being said, there's still some really common UI patterns, components that we use and build every day that are still really, really hard to get right. And as a developer community, we've relied heavily on JavaScript frameworks or complex CSS tricks, and sometimes mountains of custom code to create these UI patterns that feel like they should be a lot simpler. And that's precisely where the Chrome team is focusing its efforts, making those surprisingly complex but really common UI patterns that are fundamental on the platform straightforward to implement. Today, we're going to zero in on 3 of those notoriously tricky patterns: the endlessly frustrating customizable select, the deceptively complex carousel, and the interactive hover card. These components may look simple to a user, but us developers know the strife of trying to get the accessibility right in the carousel buttons, or needing to completely rebuild a select with divs just to change the font or the colors. And don't even get me started on trying to create these hover cards that you see all over the place in web UIs. The good news is that the Chrome team has been working with other browser vendors, the web community, and standards bodies like the CSS Working Group and What Working Group, along with community groups like OpenUI, to standardize solutions to deliver powerful declarative APIs that tackle these challenges head-on. So there is good news there. And in this talk, I'm going to explore how upcoming browser features make building these patterns a lot simpler, more performant, and more accessible. And these features are landing. Everything that I'm going to talk about here today, with the exception of one feature at the end, has shipped in at least one stable browser engine. And I also want to note that while it may not look complete yet, those features that have landed in Chrome are also a part of a process called standards, and we hope that they'll also ship across browsers. So we'll be using baseline terminology and symbols to help you understand feature availability, so look out for these throughout the talk. And also, if you didn't catch What's New in Web yesterday, you can definitely catch that online to learn more about baseline and features that have landed. So first, let's start with the select element. The select is essential for countless forms, but the internal structure has historically been obfuscated by the browser, effectively shielding it from consistent and comprehensive CSS styling across different browsers and platforms. But before we even get into the select, we need to talk about its building blocks, which are popover and anchor positioning. Not only are these features the underlying tech behind the customizable selects, but because of their primitive nature, they can do so much more. So first, let's talk about the drop-down list itself, that floating box of options. You need it above everything else in the UI, easy to dismiss, and manage focus when it opens. And customizable select leverages the super useful popover API to do just that. I talked about popover on this stage last year, and I'm excited to announce that popover has now reached baseline newly available status this year. So it's in all browsers. Really exciting to see it go from one to all of them in a year. So as an example, here we have the YouTube notifications popover, just for a visual. And a way to create a popover is fairly simple. You just need two pieces. The first is a trigger element, like this button here, and the second is the actual popover itself. All you need to do is give the popover an ID and set the popover attribute on that popover. Then you connect the popover to its invoking button using popover target, like this. Behind the scenes, the popover API isn't just showing an element, it's managing its entire life cycle. Popover automatically supports top layer rendering, so you don't have to fight with z-index and stacking context issues anymore. It provides a built-in light dismiss functionality on auto popovers, so that when a user clicks outside of the popover area, it closes. It automatically manages focus, where the browser handles tab navigations for the popover when it's opened and correctly returns tab focus to the invoking element when it's closed, ensuring predictable keyboard navigation regardless of where the popover is in the DOM structure. And while you still need to choose the correct element, whether that's a dialog, or apply the correct ARIA role to define the element's semantic purpose, like a menu or a tooltip, the underlying interaction model is handled natively. These declarative features have been so well received and work so well that it makes it really easy to reach for a popover. But that might not always be the best choice for your component. For example, when you have an interaction that blocks the rest of the page and requires some sort of user action, the layered UI element should really be a modal dialog. But the dialog element was built before popover was, so it lacked some of these neat features like light dismiss and a nice declarative API that can be triggered without JavaScript. Until now. Now we have the closed by attribute landing a few months ago in Chrome 134. Users can now use closed by equals any to enable light dismiss directly on modal dialogues. With closed by equals any, clicking outside of the dialog or pressing the escape key closes the dialog. This seemingly small interaction is such a game changer for simplifying light dismiss behavior, and it's awesome to see this land for the dialog element. Another area where repetitive JavaScript is connecting the button click to an action, like opening that dialog. Command invokers provide a declarative HTML solution similar to popover target. Here, a button invokes a command dialog. This is done by using the command and command for pattern. You can use the very straightforward command show modal, which is akin to the JavaScript show modal function. Then you target the dialog by referencing its ID in the command for attribute, like so. You can also use this to close the dialog using the close command. This command for pattern gives us a cleaner way to link elements and actions in HTML, removing boilerplate JavaScript for many standard behaviors like that opening and closing functionality. And this can be used on any element, dialog, and beyond. The browser automatically manages ARIA details for you, eliminating the need for extra JavaScript. For non-supported browsers, there is a polyfill too, and all you have to do is import this file, and it just works. It's pretty cool. I've used it, and I've checked it on non-supporting browsers. So let's put this into context and refactor an existing dialog demo that Adam Argyle designed to be more declarative. I really like this demo because it has that cool X that shows that you're closing the dialog. But here what you see we've done is we've just removed the JavaScript, and it's not closing. It's not working when you click outside. We have to add closed by equals any. So once we've added that, now when we open the dialog and click outside of it, the light dismiss is enabled declaratively in HTML without JavaScript. Next, what we can do is get rid of the rest of this boilerplate JavaScript. So here, I'm removing these inline on-click commands, and I'm replacing them with command and command for. Command for is linked to the ID of the dialog, and the command here is show modal. Now when I click, it opens that dialog without the inline JavaScript. And I can do the same thing for that close button. So I'm showing you here as I'm opening the dialog, and I hit the close button. Nothing is happening because we've removed the script. But all we have to do is add command equals close here, and then command for that demo, which is the ID of that dialog. It's linked right there. Now, all of the functionality here, opening it, closing it, light dismissing it, is built in HTML without any JavaScript needed. It's pretty cool. So now we can update this table with the new capabilities that we now have for dialogue. With command invokers and closed by equals any, you can focus on the semantic needs of your UI elements and leave the interactions to the browser. Remember that a dialogue is an element, and popover is an attribute that still needs more semantic context. But the OpenUI community group continues to work on shipping semantic UI components, like a possible future menu element with the ability to easily create nested menus like so. OK, so we've deviated a bit, but it's all good stuff. Let's get back to the select menu, which we've established decidedly uses a popover for the list box of options. But how does that popover list box appear relative to the button that opened it? Well, positioning it correctly is important, and that is what anchor positioning is for. This CSS API declaratively tethers one element to another, handling edge collision automatically. Last year on this stage, I introduced anchor positioning and talked about its powerful capabilities. And now browser support is expanding. In fact, anchor positioning is one of the features that is a part of Interop 2025, an annual cross-browser initiative to fix bugs and land highly requested developer features as quickly as possible. This means we expect anchor positioning to land in all browsers by the end of this year. Fingers crossed. In addition to anchor positioning, this year's Interop list includes backdrop filter, the details element at scope, the scroll end event, text decoration, view transitions for single-page apps, writing modes, and more. And we've seen a lot of progress on these features already, including anchor positioning. There's a lot of cool things that you can do with CSS anchor positioning, the most basic of which is, well, anchoring things together. Who could have guessed? And you may have noticed in the previous demo that the notifications and popover are anchored to this little bell icon. You can anchor any element together using anchor name and the position anchor properties like this. But as of Chrome 133, you no longer need to do this for popover elements and their invoking buttons. The browser creates an implicit anchor relationship. This makes the code for building anchored popovers much cleaner. So I'm thrilled to see this change land in the spec and roll out across browsers as this feature lands. Now, all we need to do to create an anchor is use one line of CSS, like you see here, to position it. So here we're using position area bottom span left, which is positioning at the bottom of that anchor and spanning towards the left. This language is pretty straightforward for positioning and spanning grid lines. And to make it even easier, I built this tool for you as a reference, which you can find at chrome.dev/anchor tool. You can also switch to logical properties, and instead of the directional values, to accommodate for writing modes. And you can also see the containing block. This is the inset modified containing block where that anchor is being positioned. So that is one of the interesting key details of anchor positioning. It has this inset modified containing block. This helps you visualize where it is. Initial positioning is one part of the equation for our notifications bar. But what if the user resizes the screen, or we decide to shift where that bell icon is? We could reposition where it is in an action bar, for example. We don't want our popover to get cut off in the viewport. I've had to implement logic like this before in the past, and it was not fun. It took a couple days. Luckily, the browser can now handle that for you, too. You can specify fallback positions like this one, which I've created and called left, which spans from left to right instead of right to left, or use browser defaults like flip block and flip inline. Then you can call it as a fallback when you can't position from that initial right to left position. Now you can feel confident that no matter where this notifications trigger bell lives in your UI, the popover will stay on the screen and be visually optimized. This is especially important for layouts that make heavy use of layered UI. Building something like this yourself requires resize observers, which are slow to calculate, and a lot of complex logic that you simply don't have to worry about now, and you can let the browser handle it for you. So I think this is an awesome feature. For more about the anchor positioning API, definitely check out this link where you'll find more in-depth feature coverage, and demos. So coming back to our customizable select menu. Styling the native select has always been the core challenge here, and this is really what inspired the work behind popover and anchor positioning. But we got some great primitives along the way. It still feels like something like this should be so easy to build, but achieving this really custom look takes you down a complex road. You essentially have to hide the real select and build a complete replacement using divs and lists, and then you need a lot of JavaScript to make this fake component behave like a real select, handling clicks, keyboard navigation, syncing values, and manually adding the necessary ARIA attributes for accessibility. It's brittle and a huge amount of work to get right, and even then, it doesn't work with autocomplete, which we heard yesterday is essential to a business model for many businesses out there. But native styling for select elements is finally here. And I'm excited to announce that it has reached a stable release in Chromium 134. So 2017, Unum would be very proud of this right now. It seems so simple, but it's a really big deal. Native styling for select comes with its own slew of interesting features, like a new appearance property, picker pseudo, picker icon, and a new element called selected content. First, the way to enter into the customizable select mode is by using the appearance property and setting it to base select. You do this on the select itself and on a new pseudo element called the picker. Picker is a functional pseudo element that will eventually accept other picker types like color, but it essentially targets the popover, which contains the list of options. So in select, it's that drop-down list. Using appearance-based select unlocks a number of new features and behaviors, including exposing new internal parts and states of the select, showing options in the top layer as a popover, and positioning them with anchor positioning. It will also simplify the user agent styles that you can see here, so you can bring your own. You now have access to full built-in styling for the select drop-downs button, options, checked option, and even a new pseudo element for a check mark, which indicates the selected option. All of this together gives you a ton of unique control over customizing select, and in a much easier, more straightforward way than before. Take this example, which is similar to Google AI Studio's picker menu. Here, I have a button where I'm inserting selected content, and each option has a slot for an icon, title, and subtitle. One neat thing that I'm doing here is making the selected content, which shows the option that I picked, only show the name of the Gemini version. So I'm hiding the rest of the content in that option, like the subtitle and icon, which would otherwise get reflected in the selected content. And I'm doing this by simply setting it to display none in that selected content. I'm also bringing in a custom background image using a base64 encoded image for that check mark to indicate the checked item, and I'm repositioning it from the user agent default styles. One of the coolest things about reusing the existing select element for this feature is the progressive enhancement story. In a complex select like this one, like this currency picker, when you're using the customizable select in browsers that have this feature, you can see what it looks like on the left. But in non-supported browsers, you still get meaningful content that the user can select. And you get autocomplete, and you get all of those native defaults that the browser provides for you for free. That's cool. But of course, the most significant benefit is that you can achieve this customized look while preserving the native select elements, built-in accessibility, keyboard navigation, and form integration. You're not throwing away the browser's work. You're just changing how it looks. And to help you use it correctly in Chrome 137, you will be able to see warnings in DevTools if you violate accessibility guidelines when building customizable selects, like having interactive elements inside of options. So we want to make sure that you use this right. Temu is one of our partners who's already been exploring the customizable select and has provided some really great feedback. And we've been working with them on enabling next-generation functionality for selects, like this type filtering functionality. The next big UI challenge is carousels and other off-screen user interfaces. Love them or hate them, carousels are all over the web. product showcases, image galleries, onboarding flows. They are incredibly useful for fitting related content into tight spaces. And building them is, well, it's hard. It's not easy. We wrestle with scripting for state management, scroll jank, interactivity, cross-browser compatibility, and getting the accessibility right. Along the lines of today's theme of a more powerful web made easier, now the browser can again handle much of that complexity for us. But really, when you think about it, carousels are just fancy scroll areas with some extra UI affordances, like buttons and markers to manage navigation and pagination. So let's make a carousel. The way to get started is by creating some content that flows off screen. But now we have this dreaded horizontal scroll bar. Who's fought with this before? I have fought with these. Yeah, a lot of hands are up in the room. One neat little trick that just reached baseline widely available is scroll bar with none. So you can feel confident using this feature. I'm happy that this landed. To make a UI maintain that horizontal scrollability without a visible scroll bar, we no longer have to do some weird negative margin hacks. Now you can just set scroll bar width to none, and poof, like that, the scroll bar is gone, and the content is still scrollable. Just one of those little big things. With a few lines of CSS here, I've set overflow, removed that scroll bar visually, and given our carousel an anchor name, because that will come in handy in a minute. And using scroll snap type and scroll snap align, which are both widely available since January 2020, I've enabled item by item snapping to the center of the carousel. Now that we have our scroller set up, let's start with our first scroll navigation affordance, and that is previous and next buttons. The new scroll button pseudo element makes this easy for you, but it doesn't just provide an entry point to style a button. It also tells the browser to generate connected, stateful button elements for navigating this scroll container, including a disabled state when you can't scroll anymore in a given direction, like you can see here at the start. That's the real magic with CSS scroll buttons. The browser automatically gives these buttons the correct ARIA role, puts them in the tab order, and disables them at the start or the end, so you don't need to write any scripting to do all of this. You can instantiate the buttons like other pseudo elements with a selector. Scroll button right as a button on the right, and scroll button left for the left. You can also use top, bottom, and logical properties like button inline start. And you can style both at the same time with an asterisk in the argument. You need to add content to give these pseudos a meaningful, accessible label, which can be done using this slash syntax. So look how simple that is. Just make your container scrollable, add these rules, and boom, you have navigation buttons. And now you can lay out these buttons however you want, including in a parent grid or using CSS anchor positioning. Remember how we just set an anchor name on our carousel? Well, this is where it's going to come in handy. We'll need to use that anchor name to anchor the previous and next buttons in the carousel like so. We're using position area again to position them. Just like the page down button on your keyboard, scroll buttons shift the content in the carousel by 85% of the scroll port by default. But you can have more precise control by using scroll snap type and scroll snap stop. For example, the code here will now only shift the carousel one item at a time when you click the buttons. OK, so previous and next buttons are a great start, but what about direct navigation? Think those dot indicators or thumbnails. This is where scroll marker comes in. I like this naming because it aligns with marker elements for list items too, scroll marker and scroll marker group. Scroll marker lets you associate navigation markers directly with the items inside of your scroll container. To add a scroll marker, similar to scroll buttons, you can use a pseudo element that is initiated with the content property. Be sure to give these accessible labels as well, like I'm doing here. And what I prefer doing is using a data attribute. So for each individual item, I could have a data name on that list item, and then I could pull it into the content as its label using the attribute function like so. So now I'm dynamically reading the data name on each item and giving that label to all of these navigation dots. This is a great feature. I love using Adder, and it's a great use case when you're using it for labeling like this. But The attribute function also got a big upgrade in Chrome 133, so it's even more powerful now. Before, attr was a way to pull string content from data attributes to display as content in pseudo elements. So it was pretty limited to strings. But now you can use data attributes in a much more meaningful way and cast the values to colors, numbers, percentages, custom identifiers, and so on. It's a really cool feature too, yeah. So take this example of a rating UI. We're setting the rating directly as a data attribute in this div, and if you're using a framework, which you probably are, this is likely how you're doing it with props, where you're setting the data rating. We already have this information. So now, using data rating, you can reference this numeric value and use it in your styles. Here we're using attr, data rating, we're giving it a type number, so we're casting it to the number, and we're doing some calculations to create that fill percentage, which is filling in a mask. These stars are a mask, and now we're using that number of the rating to create the percentages that we want to fill the mask. We're doing this all in one line of code in that CSS custom property. So we can now use that value inside of a gradient and give that gradient a hard stop to actually visualize that fill percent. This is a trick I use all the time with linear gradients and that hard stop value. Super useful. We can even reuse that data attribute in the content to display the value. So I think that this extended, powerful, typed capability for the attr function is awesome, and it's really cool. I think this really showcases how powerful CSS is getting. And speaking of powerful CSS, let's get back to our scroll markers. After we've initialized the scroll marker with content, we have scroll markers that are placed in the scroll marker group, which is the element where they're going to be created. This is some browser magic that does this, because scroll marker is attached to each item in your carousel scroller. So every list item or every div or every iframe, however you've created the carousel, will get a scroll marker. But the scroll marker group lives inside of the carousel parent. So it's kind of funky. If you start building with these, you can explore in DevTools, and you'll see the difference of where they live versus how they're attached. But it kind of needs to be that way so that you can do the accessible labels and connect it to all of your items. The browser treats the scroll marker group like a tab list and the markers like links. It even handles the keyboard navigation between markers using arrow keys, just like a focus group. Finally, there is a new pseudo-class primitive to style the active marker called target current. You can use target current to style the active scroll marker. In this case, we're giving it this blue background. With just these three CSS features, we've set up all of the state logic, keyboard navigation, identified the active marker, hooked up all of its content, and enabled full stylability of carousel marker indicators. Again, this is incredibly powerful with very minimal CSS. Another neat scroll marker demo is this product card. It uses image URLs in the scroll markers as a background image to provide a preview of the item that you're about to use. And you can do this because you can use a background image for each scroll marker that's connected to each list item. So that's a pretty neat feature to see. And again, it's just a scrollable list of items that we're creating using these carousel primitives. A basic carousel could definitely look a little bit nicer with a touch of animation design. And since we've established that a carousel is a fancy scroller now, let's use some fancy new scroll APIs. From scroll state queries to scroll-driven animations, there have been a lot of new scroll features that have landed in the past few months, which make it possible to make carousels just beautifully interactive. This brings me to a new type of media query called scroll state queries. And I'm so thrilled to see this feature landing because it solves a lot of previously really hard to build and manage UI state linked to scrollers. There are three types of scroll state queries that let you apply styles in new ways based on a parent element's state. There's stuck for sticky elements. There's snapped, as in snapped in a scroller. And there's scrollable, which tells you if there is overflow. The first is the stuck state, used for sticky positioned elements. You can now style an element when its parent is indeed stuck in the stuck position. In this example, the header for each section gets darker and gets a box shadow when its parent section becomes sticky. So this is a really nice UI affordance for your users. You set the containment on the parent with container type scroll state, and apply styling with the container query, the @container scroll state stuck top. You'll also want to transition these properly for that smooth effect. Next, we have the scrollable state query, which is really useful for visual indicators of scroll-enabled experiences. We're querying for scrollability on the bottom edge here and applying a linear gradient to an after pseudo element. You would repeat this on the top as well, and this is just a classic scroll indicator. Again, a great UI affordance for your users. Another scroll affordance is the scroll to top button, which is cleverly built here, mixing not with this state query. So it's saying @container not scroll state scrollable. If it's no longer scrollable, then animate this in, have it appear. And then we're translating it here from the bottom up. This would be an anchor link too. When you click it, it goes to the top. So I like this. I think this is a neat feature. Super useful. And finally, there is a new snapped state query, which works so nicely for carousel items and other snapped elements. In our carousel, we can add a style to the snapped element to give it more focus and attention. So here we're making it larger than its sibling items. I think it's a little bit washed out on the screen, but there is a light blue background. These items are getting bigger, and you can see it in this text as that number 4 is expanding. We're scaling it up from 0.8 to 1 so that you can see that a little bit more visually clearly. And I think that scroll state queries like this are a game changer. They really are. So the second new feature that we can use to really give our carousels and any scroll-based experience some more zhuzh and dynamic flair are scroll-driven animations. And here's just a taste of scroll-driven animations from our friends at Web Studio.
Here are 1,000 animated elements, synced perfectly with scroll. Who needs this on a website? Well, nobody, but this is what it takes to have super stable animation performance on different devices. Your device can be busy, your JavaScript can be doing things that you're not even aware of, but none of this can ever interrupt the animation. Otherwise, you get the junk that we're used to on the web today. These are silky smooth browser-native animations made possible by the Scroll Timeline API. You can animate any style, such as rotate and color, to the things you may not be used to seeing, such as shadow or filters as they move through the viewport. And these are powerful and performant, relying on cutting-edge browser technology. It's simple to get started. You can use one-click presets or go pedal to the metal and create complex compositions with precise control over every detail. Everything's performance perfected, it's future-proof, and it's compatible with all modern browsers. And it's available today.
Companies like Web Studio are using scroll-driven animations at the core of their business model, amending this browser-native feature for non-supported browsers using a polyfill built by Rob Flack, who's one of the primary Chrome engineers who's been working on this feature. And we can even use scroll-driven animations to jazz up our carousels, too. In this carousel, most of the work is done here using scroll-driven animations, sizing up each item as it flows through the scroller. And you can tell this is scroll-driven animations because it's not just a unique state for the snapped item, but each item goes through a scale-up as it moves over to the left. Behind the scenes, the animation is translating and scaling each item, and it begins off-screen, animating it in that range to 20 CQI, which is a container query inline unit. This demo is also using container queries here. And to top it off, the new scroll button affordance adds a nice web-style flair to this experience. So we have these buttons, we have these scrollers, we have scroll-driven animations. We're bringing it all together to make really silky smooth UIs. Here's another example where scroll-driven animations is doing the heavy lifting, this time in a carousel scroller. You can really see the breadth of experiences that you're creating here using scroll-driven animations and carousel primitives. To learn more about scroll-driven animations, my colleague Bramas van Dam has you covered. So check out this link with a full gallery of animation patterns, and there's a free video series on YouTube that he created, which walks you through all of the features included in this API. So if you want to dig deep, definitely check out this link. One more key accessibility concern for carousels is the ability to focus the user on the active content with easy access to navigation affordances like the buttons and markers, essentially blurring what is not focused on the screen at a given time. To solve for this, the Chrome team is working with the accessibility community to resolve on an interactivity property that will help properly support blur and focus management. The code here uses scroll state queries to apply inertness to any card that is not currently snapped. Interactivity inert is equivalent of dynamically applying the inert attribute which already exists in HTML. So this isn't a new concept, but it is a new way to use it. There is an evolving dialogue on this feature and how to best support developers when applying inertness. To check out even more carousel demos, including scroll spy effects, paged content, slider galleries, and everything I showed here, check out chrome.dev/carousel. There's a ton of good stuff here. So that's chrome.dev/carousel. And check out the carousel configurator tool too, which is linked from chrome.dev/carousel, for a closer look at how to use these APIs. That is chrome.dev/carousel configurator. Carousels are already being explored by Google Search as a way to improve performance under the hood while maintaining their existing UI. They estimated the potential to save 60 to 75% of their carousel script, allowing JavaScript required by other features or async deferred content to load earlier. So there really are performance benefits of using these browser native features. Using native CSS carousels means instant interactivity without requiring added JavaScript. Elementor, which is a WordPress-based web creation platform that powers more than 12% of the web, has also been experimenting with CSS carousels for their page builder, shown here with customizable scroll buttons and markers. In fact, Elementor has decided to shift their entire web development approach to being CSS first, citing better design consistency and maintainability at scale. We're Team CSS here. With the CSS-only carousel, Elementor was able to remove 165 kilobytes of JavaScript and dramatically reduce their page size, leading to a snappy and instant page loading experience, which means a better experience for all of their users. And the CSS working group is already looking ahead to exploring things like bringing your own custom elements for buttons and markers and native cyclical scrolling. Now let's move on to our final UI pattern, the hover card. You may recognize these from social media platforms, Gmail, web apps. They're all over the place. You mouse over a username or a link, and a rich tooltip pops up, often hitting an API, showing profile information, quick links, additional interactive content, or a preview of what you're about to click into. Building this is, well, it's really tough. It involves managing multiple interest-based events and states and adding event delays on interest, displaying and dismissing the popover open and close states, managing various other modalities like pointer devices. Think about desktop, keyboard navigation, touchscreen interactions, and also hooking into accessibility correctly. This also includes tab management and content blur. The only teams that I know who have actually shipped these features have spent months on them and had dedicated support teams just to get something out the door and make sure it works for their users. Not long ago, I remember speaking to folks at another big tech company about how challenging it was for them to build their layered UI features. It took a team of 3 engineers 6 months to build an interest-enabled popover, and they still weren't sure that they got it right. And they didn't have it support touch devices either. This complexity and this ubiquity is why we want to solve this problem on the web once and for all. Popover and anchor positioning get you much of the way there, but you still need a few more things. Which brings me to the magic of interest target. If you saw the developer keynote, you saw this in action. This is an early-stage origin trial feature, so know that it is subject to change, but it really packs a lot of power. And you can try it out today by turning on experimental web platform features in Chrome Canary using the flag. Interest invokers bring you the power of declarative popover actions, but instead of relying on a click to open the button, the user instead shows interest, such as a hover for pointer devices, tab navigation with keyboard, or long press on touch screens. This also means that you can now apply tooltips and other functional information to links and other meaningful content, enabling this multifunctional aspect to your layered user interfaces. To change one of our popovers to be invoked via interest instead of a click, all you need to do is change popover target to interest target. Everything else stays the same, including setting an ID and a popover attribute on the popover being opened via interest. This means that many of the benefits are the same, including top layer support and semantically connecting invoking elements to their interest targets. But what is new are the entry and exit effects. Now the browser handles these events on the user showing interest, whether that's on hover, tab navigation, or long press. And with interest invokers, you can now also set event delays with one line of CSS, giving your users more time to interact or waiting for a longer interest hold before opening. Let's take a look at an example. In this demo, each of these links triggers a preview card on interest. This pattern is super useful because it gives you more information about what you're about to click on with potentially added behavior without having to leave the page and lose your flow, letting the interaction work on the click as double duty. The document structure uses simple HTML. As I just mentioned, one unique feature of interest targets is that they can be placed on links, not only buttons, like regular popover invokers. So here we have some links that reference the different popovers, again, by ID. And you have full styling control over this popover. You can even adjust these entry and exit delays. So now we're using the interest target delay here. And if you don't want any delay, you can just set it to 0 seconds. But if you want it to appear with more of a delay, you can increase that time to 1 second. So here I'm showing 1 second. This is useful when you have rich content in your tooltip that you want to give users a chance to reach, delaying its blur state when they lose interest. And if you want to have an entry delay of 0 seconds but an exit delay of 1 second, you can do that too. You have full control of these entry and exit delays. Finally, I want to highlight, pun intended, this new hasInterest pseudo class that lets you style an element on any interest interaction. You might notice that this link underline, which occurs on hover, fades at a different rate than the yellow background. This is the difference between something like a hover and focus pseudo class versus interest. This hasInterest pseudo class. Hover and focus would happen with no delay, but here we have a 1 second exit delay on these interest invokers, so you can see them occurring at different rates. Let's take a look at another example, this time showing that you can have multiple popovers being invoked from a single button. Remember that popover from the start of this talk? We can now add a tooltip to it on interest and keep the click functionality for the notifications popover. The notifications bell is still invoking this auto popover with the notifications in it and behaves using click or space or touch to open. But now we have an interest-triggered tooltip that gives you a preview description of what that bell icon means, too. And if you didn't notice, the tooltip popover doesn't close other auto popovers when it's open. This is because of a new popover type called popover equals hint, which landed in Chrome 133 to complete the trifecta of popover types. Shout out to the team. What's the difference, you might be wondering? Well, mostly the difference lies in its behavior. Popover equals auto and popover equals manual both close other popovers when they're open. Popover manual requires a specific close event to close it, and it doesn't support light dismiss. And popover equals hint is the only popover type that doesn't close other popovers when opened. You use a hint popover like any other popover, giving it a value of hint. Now, this type of popover will not close other popovers when opened. Hint popovers are most useful when combined with interest target because an auto or manual popover will close if you click anywhere else in the UI anyway. So to keep them open, you must be able to trigger a popover without a click event or equivalent. That's why interest invokers and hint popovers go together like peanut butter and jelly. The hint popover is useful for a variety of layered UIs like tooltips, profile cards, action bars, preview cards for links, basically anywhere that you have an element, an existing popover open, you want to open another one without closing other popovers, like menus, chat windows, etc. And our Origin trial partners are already finding this feature super handy. CBS News built out these author bio cards using the Interest Invoker API. Using native browser functionality meant less overhead and a smoother implementation overall. They also noted that one nice bonus was the built-in pseudo-class styling for styling when that popover is open, which let them handle visual states cleanly without extra JavaScript. If you want Interest Target to land, we need to hear from you. If you're here, come talk to us at the demo booth or the Q&A station, and if you're watching online, leave a comment on this YouTube video. Let us know if you would use this and how you would use this. The shape of this feature is an active discussion, and you can add your voice to the conversation now. We've just tackled 3 of the most notoriously difficult UI patterns. Customizable selects, which are now enabled with the popover API and anchor positioning, with full native customization landing in Chrome 134. Carousels made easier in Chrome 135 with scroll markers, scroll buttons, interactivity, and scroll state queries. And hover cards, which are becoming declarative using popover equals hint and the evolving Interest Invoker API. These features, yes. These features, the vast majority of which are now available in Chrome Stable, and this represents a fundamental shift. They empower us to build complex UI patterns in a way that's more accessible, more performant, more efficient, using the power of declarative CSS and HTML. This means less code craft, better performance, built-in accessibility, and more time for you to innovate and focus on the fun stuff, the stuff that we want to do. I encourage you to check out the demos and resources linked on web.dev and the Chrome for Developers blog, which is at developer.chrome.com. Try refactoring one of your existing UI components and see how much JavaScript you can get rid of. It's a lot of fun, I promise. It's a lot of fun to do that. And the features mentioned here today are just the tip of the iceberg. We also have a ton of other awesome features that we've landed or are working on landing soon in the web platform, like calc size and interpolate size for animating from height 0 to auto. That wasn't possible before. All of these really cool new text box trim properties, text box trim, text box edge for typography. The new responsive shape function, if you haven't seen that one yet, that one's really great. CSS logical if and CSS functions. That if is coming out in 137. I'll be writing about that soon. There's advances in view transitions and navigation, and there's even more coming out soon, like sibling count and sibling index for staggered animation effects, progress functions, additional math functions, and CSS mix-ins. To learn more, again, you can follow us online at web.dev and developer.chrome.com. You can join us here at the Q&A sessions and demo booths. You can follow me or Brahmas on the DevRel team on Twitter or Blue Sky. Follow Chromium devs. Check out all of the resources that we have for you. There is a lot. And again, a huge thank you to the engineering teams that have made all of this possible. Let's give them a round of applause because they're the ones who are building the web for you all. And thank you also for following along, using these features, giving us feedback, and for making the web awesome. Don't be afraid to give us feedback. Your input, it really does directly shape the future of the web platform. So let's build smarter, not harder. Thank you again. Thank you.
Devin, look at all of our friends.
Hello, hello.
We're so excited to be here. Welcome to our friends online, and welcome to all of our friends in the room. This is What's New in Angular, or as I originally called it, I'm not kidding, this is true, all the fantastic updates coming to Angular developers everywhere, but they made me change it. I wasn't too happy, but we'll still keep this party going, because you know what? Angular has had this incredible moment in the developer world. We've been shipping features to improve the developer experience for everyone. Listen, we've been working hard to bring you the new features that are so exciting and that enable you to build new application experiences. And I'll be honest with you, I get to do the work that I love on a team that I love with a community that I love being a part of. So you all are fantastic. Give yourselves a round of applause. Yeah, it's okay to be happy for yourselves. People look. So we get to see the joy that developers experience from improved APIs, better integrations, and again, that overall better experience. Now, we take a lot of pride in that we work so diligently to reduce the pain points and making things easier for you as developers. But say this next part with me. But wait, there's more. That's right. There's more. See, the Angular team is working on something really special, and I bet that you can guess what it is. It's the next version of Angular, Angular version 20. So we're going to share news with you across 3 different areas. We'll talk about new features, we'll talk about new integrations, and some of the other teams at Google that we're partnering with, and we're also going to talk about new directions. Where's the Angular team going? What other things are we going to be doing? So to tell you all about it, I need you to give me a just enormous round of applause to welcome Devin to the front.
Thanks, everybody. What would a session like this be without telling developers about the one thing they care about most? That's right, you guessed it. Integration testing. I'm kidding. New features. Oh my God, they were about to leave. It's okay. New features. And we know that building apps that your users love goes hand in hand with a delightful developer experience. I am just thrilled to share what the Angular team has been up to lately. This team has been on a roll, just cooking. And looking back at all this progress, I'm convinced that what I thought were groundbreaking features at the time were really just paving the way for even more incredible improvements. And today, I'm going to tell you the next part of the story for Angular signals, server-side rendering, and authoring improvements, starting with Angular signals. When it comes to state management in Angular, we've got a new mantra over here on the Angular team. Work smarter, not harder, thanks to Angular signals. Last year, we released signals in developer preview. At a high level, signals are Angular's modern approach to reactivity, a hassle-free way to manage application state that reduces the amount of imperative code that you have to write. As I like to put it, Angular's new signal-based approach takes the management out of state management, which I love because when it comes to writing code, we're all really lazy. Who wrote this? Busy. We're all really busy. We're not lazy. A signal is a wrapper around a value that notifies consumers when its value has changed. There are several variations, including a signal, your basic signal, as well as computed. Now, you might be asking yourself, hey, signals have been around since v17. Why are you bringing this up in a talk that was almost titled, All the Fantastic Updates Coming to Angular Developers? Well, for one, signal and computed are now stable, which is a huge milestone for the framework. And in v19, we introduced linked signal. A linked signal is a writable signal dependent on some other state. Another way to think about it, in its most basic form, is a computed signal that you can set directly. But linked signal also gives you the ability to access prior state, which makes it a game changer in the signal ecosystem, as I'll illustrate in just a little bit. When you factor in linked signal, Angular signals give you the ability to create a reactive, self-managing graph of your application state, which means less development time, means fewer bugs, and superior maintainability. This really is a paradigm shift and a new way of thinking about state management. And a large part of the reason for this, and I thought this was so interesting, signals have no concept of time. Think about that. So rather than managing application state in response to events that occur over time and tracking those events, you design a reactive system for computing state at any given point in time. It's a subtle but really important distinction that you begin to pick up on the more you work with signals. Oh, and did I mention linked signal is being upgraded to stable in v20? Back in v19, we also introduced a new experimental type of signal called a resource for reactively fetching asynchronous data. Or another way to think about it is a container for data fetched asynchronously. And as a reactive primitive, resource can update in response to other signals changing value, and it can notify downstream consumers when its value has changed. Let's look at an example inspired by an app I built earlier this year that uses Gemini to create an interactive, choose-your-own-adventure graphic novel builder. And as a side note, if you're interested in this, we open sourced the code, so you can go to our Angular examples GitHub repository to check it out, create your own graphic novels, and we also live streamed us building this live alongside our incredible Angular community, so you can check out our YouTube channel if you want to see more. One of the app's features is generating images, because, well, wouldn't be a graphic novel without graphics now, would it? And in addition to displaying images, we also wanted to let users know the loading status, as well as give them the ability to retry failed requests. And great news, Resource handles all of this functionality right out of the box. Let's look at some code. Here, we define a resource, and it calls an asynchronous function to generate an image using Gemini through the GenKit library. Resource has a params field, which we've populated with a signal called image description. Anytime this signal changes, the resource will run the asynchronous function defined in our loader field. The loader function takes the params as a parameter, and here you can see the loader function uses data in the params, our signal, to call GenKit's asynchronous run flow method to generate an image with Gemini and return the image URL. Resource exposes a status field as well as this convenient isLoading method. So in this case, we can show a loading spinner to the user while the request is loading. And Resource also has a reload method. So in the case of an error, which is represented by an empty string in our application, we can show the user a piece of UI that when clicked, retries the request. And finally, because the image resource is effectively just a container for our asynchronously fetched data, we can dynamically set the image source, thereby rendering our beautiful image. And with that, we've created an entire image generation pipeline complete with loading status, retry, and we did it all with a single resource and 5 lines of code. That's pretty cool. And again, you can see that we've done this by defining how application state will be determined rather than writing code that determines it ourselves. In addition to generating images, this app also generates the story text for our graphic novel. Let's look at how we can combine resource with linked signal to accomplish our goal.
Wait, Devin. Did you generate that story text with Gemini? Because I'm pretty sure that we get bonuses every time we mention Gemini.
Oh, right. How's this?
Okay, better.
I know what you're thinking. Too subtle. Bam! How's that?
Yeah, now we're cooking.
All right. Anyhow, here you can see our story resource that relies on changes to a user input signal to determine if we should fetch new story parts, and the function assigned to our loader field returns an array of the latest 3 parts of our story, the latest 3 panels of our graphic novel. However, we're not just interested in the latest 3 parts of the story. We want to show the users the whole story. Because what's the fun in creating a graphic novel if you can't just read the entire thing? And this is where link signal comes in handy. Using this signature of link signal, we can reactively update its value to the result of the computation field anytime our source, in this case our story resource value, changes. And the computation field leverages the previous state of our link signal, appends the most recent values returned from our server, and gives us the full story, all stored in this single linked signal. This simply wouldn't be possible with a standard signal. And resource is such an integral piece of the puzzle that we released several experimental variations to streamline developer workflows, starting with HTTP resource, which basically serves the same purpose as a resource, but it's designed specifically for fetching data from HTTP endpoints. And this method signature is pretty slick. With HTTP resource, you don't need to define params or a loader function. Instead, you effectively embed your params directly into the request. So in this example, we'll make a request to the API user endpoint anytime our current user ID signal changes. And I also want to highlight a new streaming resource pattern that we released in version 19.2 that you can use to reactively update the UI as chunks are streamed from the server. With all of these improvements, developer experience is only part of the Signal story. Because Signal's fine-grained reactivity model can also provide significant performance benefits. For one, Signals provide an efficient mechanism for computing state, and this gets even more exciting when we factor in our next major update. Introducing zoneless Angular. Yeah. Should have stayed on that slide for an extra second. Well, historically, Angular has relied on Zone.js to manage change detection and updating the DOM. And although signals provide us with the ability to see exactly which pieces of UI need to be updated, Zone.js still runs change detection in response to all browser events, not just the ones that result in updates to our templates. And that can lead to a lot of unnecessary checks. But not anymore, because in Angular v20, we'll be upgrading zoneless Angular to developer preview so that developers can remove Zone.js from their applications altogether. With this change, developers have explicit control over when and how change detection runs. For example, by running mark for change or by leveraging Signal's inherent knowledge of state changes. And this, they can trigger updates more precisely, making zoneless plus Signals a powerful combination. Like I said, work smarter, not harder. And while we're on the topic of performance, let's shift our focus to server-side rendering. SSR helps developers improve website performance by rendering HTML on the server that contains initial page state. And then once the HTML is delivered to the browser, Angular initializes the app and makes use of the data contained within the HTML. And since then, we've introduced several pieces to the server-side rendering story. The first of which I'll be covering today is route-level render mode config APIs to provide greater control when using hybrid rendering with server-side routing. Hybrid rendering has been around for a few years now and combines the benefits of server-side rendering, pre-rendering, also known as static-side generation, as well as client-side rendering to optimize your Angular application. And in version 19, we introduced the hybrid rendering config API to render different parts of your application using different strategies. And this new feature gives you complete control over your app's rendering to enhance performance, search engine optimization, and overall user experience, resulting in greater flexibility, built-in internationalization, and a seamless dev server experience. That last one's actually one of my favorites. I just love being able to run ng-serve with an SSR app and get the full benefits of hot module replacement without having to rebuild. Oh, so nice, so nice. And we've got some nifty CLI commands that you can use to easily integrate this functionality into new and existing Angular apps. So once you're set up with server routing, you can use the render mode field to declare which routes should be rendered from the server as fully populated HTML, pre-rendered at build time with static site generation, or rendered in the browser with client-side rendering. There's even more to the SSR story than that. In V19, we also introduced incremental hydration, which is why I've been taking these small sips throughout. Stay hydrated, my friends. So, in case you need a refresher, hydration is the process of restoring a server-side rendered application in the client by doing things like reusing server-rendered DOM structures, persisting application state, and transferring application data that was previously fetched on the server. Hydration improves application performance by avoiding the extra work to recreate DOM nodes. With incremental hydration, you can leave sections of your application dehydrated and incrementally trigger their hydration as needed. So this demo here shows incremental hydration in action for a server-side rendered page. Components that are initially dehydrated are shown in gray. And at the beginning, everything besides that top bar is grayed out because we haven't yet downloaded the JavaScript. Then you can see the color effect applied as the user click event triggers hydration for each of these components. In Angular, we handle this using defer blocks with hydrate triggers. As shown in this example, our large component isn't hydrated until after a user interacts with it, and we can use a placeholder until that time comes. This is yet another opportunity for Angular developers to improve application performance by producing smaller initial bundles while still providing end users with an experience comparable to full application hydration. But wait, there's more. But wait, there's more.
Devin, did you just glitch?
No, oh, no, I'm just really excited about this next feature because in Angular v19, event replay is enabled by default. A common problem in server-side rendered apps in any framework is the gap that occurs between a user event and the browser downloading and executing the code to actually handle that event. This visual demonstrates event replay in action. So when the browser renders the app for the first time, it hasn't yet downloaded the JavaScript. And while it's downloading, the user clicks the Add to Cart button 4 times. In the background, Event Dispatch records all of these events. And when the JavaScript responsible for handling this event is done downloading, Event Dispatch replays the events, resulting in all 4 items being added to our cart. Last May, we shared the Event Dispatch library to address this exact use case, which you can enable by configuring your hydration provider with Event Replay. Shifting focus, did anyone catch me breeze over hot module replacement earlier? Well, let's take a second to talk about one of my favorite developer experience improvements. Hot module replacement, or HMR, is a technique used by development servers to avoid reloading the entire page when only part of an application has changed, so that you can see changes immediately reflected in the browser. This can be extremely useful when you're, say, updating HTML or CSS, but you want to preserve the state of your application in the browser. Next, I'm thrilled to share some updates related to authoring in Angular. The future, it's standalone. We've gotten a ton of positive feedback from the community about standalone components. In V14, we introduced standalone in developer preview. And this made it possible to build applications without ng modules for the first time. And since then, standalone has been stabilized, and starting in V19, we made standalone true the default for components, pipes, and directives. In addition to making it easier to learn Angular and manage projects, standalone components have paved the way for several new features, like deferrable views, simplified route-level lazy loading, as well as the directive composition API. In V19.2, we also introduced support for untagged literals and Angular templates, so you can take advantage of string interpolation with literal expression right in your templates. This could be useful for things like improved readability, dynamic class naming and styling, enhanced string manipulation, inline expression evaluation, and more. Here, we're able to cleanly interpolate the call with property into the class list of this div. And with this setup, we can easily change the column width by updating the call width signal while maintaining the layout class styling. And finally, have you started using Angular's new let syntax? We are listening to your feedback, and the new let syntax solves one of the community's most upvoted issues by enabling developers to define and reuse variables inside Angular templates. Is it just me, or did we ship a ton of features? From signals to SSR and authoring improvements. We're working hard to ship what you need. Oh, thanks. I'm relatively new to this team, having joined earlier this year. One of the most impressive things I've noticed is how deeply invested this team is in making Angular the best framework on the planet for building web applications. I mean, just look at how many features we've shipped since this time last year. And we're not done yet. We're still listening. We're still building. And Angular v20 is coming to you next week. We can't wait to share even more exciting updates with you. And with that, give it up. With that, I'm going to pass it back to Mark to talk about some exciting new integrations.
All right, thanks, Devin. Fantastic work. So exciting. So let's talk new integrations, because software is built in components of systems that work together with one goal: to help your users accomplish tasks, whatever they've set out to do. So let's explore some new integrations that will empower Angular developers everywhere. Now, in version 20, we're going to update our testing story with a pretty meaningful change, because we're going to be adding support for a very popular third-party testing framework. But before we talk about that, let's talk about how we got here. You see, previously we used Karma as our test runner, and we would export the results. Everyone used it, and people had a pretty good time. But Karma was deprecated, and so it put us in a unique position with a unique opportunity. Because did it mean that we could finally see the end of unit testing? Woo! Okay, so the people who clapped, you did not pass my test. But I appreciate that energy. Well, no, no, we definitely could not be at the end of unit testing, but it put us an opportunity for a fresh start. Because here's what we thought about. The external developer community has advanced testing so much, and there are so many options out there, so we figured that we should try to find the best options to present to the Angular community to help you achieve your best development. So as we're searching for a long-term solution, we knew that we had to choose something that hit 3 major points for us. First, there needed to be a well-lit path, because here on the Angular team, we're very proud of our work that we've done to always bring the community along with us whenever we introduce a significant change. Then we're looking for strong community support, because we really want to make Angular a wonderful place to build web apps. But we had to choose a tool that has strong community support so that we will have confidence that it'll be a long-lasting solution. And finally, it has to improve the overall developer experience. There are so many options to consider. But if it doesn't increase the overall developer experience, then it's just not going to fit for our wonderful community. Developers have 2 options right now. You can test in a node-based environment, or you can test in a browser-based environment. And so for node-based testing, we have experimental just support. And if you want to do something in the browser, we have experimental support for Web Test Runner. But then we thought, could we find something that could potentially let you test in node environments and in the browsers? Because at a high level, that will solve some problems that some development teams are facing right now. So with that in mind, we are happy to announce that in Angular version 20, we're introducing support for V-Test, experimental support for V-Test. We know you will be happy about that. Like, we're not surprised. We heard you. You've been telling us this for a while, that you want to try this out. So now as a developer, an Angular developer, you have 3 things that you can choose from. If you want to do node testing, you have experimental jest support. For browser, Web Test Runner, and then you can try for node and browser testing support for V-Test. But here's where your expertise comes into play, because we need your help. You see, we aren't going to support all 3 in the long term. It's not realistic. We would love for you to try these out, give us some feedback, and then that'll help us to be guided toward the right solution for this amazing community. And we'll let you know in an upcoming release. All right, now let's turn our attention to what's probably the most important metric for developers, aside from revenue, and that people really care about for their applications: performance. So what's that? Say it again. Okay, let's turn our attention. No, just kidding. The Angular team is steadfast in our approach to delivering features to help you create performant applications. But we noticed that while we had great tooling for debugging in IDEs, if you want to capture profiling data, it was a little bit challenging. So let's take a look at a very common tool in Chrome DevTools. That's the flame chart. Now, flame charts are incredibly helpful, but even if we're looking at this example, look at the number of entries that you find there. There's so much data, so much robust data there, so much opportunity. But it can be hard to figure out which parts are your application and then which parts are from a different library or for something else. You know what we thought? I wish there was a better way.
Mark, there is a better way.
Yes, there is. Because we are so thrilled to announce that we've partnered with the Chrome DevTools team to create a custom track in Chrome DevTools for Angular developers. This is really cool. So in this new track, we surface custom profiling data specific to you and your Angular applications in language that you are familiar with and understand. You can quickly identify your code from other code from maybe a third-party library. Now, the custom track is clearly labeled to give you notice at a glance that you're viewing profile information specific to Angular. But we didn't stop there. You see, the entries are actually color-coded to give you even more important information. For example, entry points like change detection and component processing, those are blue. But then generated code is purple and TypeScript code is green. Now, the custom track is even more feature rich because you can click on any one of those entries and then get even more data about that entry. So you're probably thinking, how do I get started with this? First, you got to be on Angular version 20. So be sure to update next week when it comes out. Second, be on the latest version of Chrome. Then when you head over to the profiling panel, you'll be able to see this new custom track. Now, we got to give a huge shout out and thank you to the Chrome DevTools team for their incredible partnership on this. By leveraging the power of the recently introduced Performance Panel Extensibility API, we were able to create this awesome new feature. Now, this new integration with Chrome DevTools will further empower you to create applications and experiences that your users will love. All right, if you like what we've been talking about so far, let's hear some noise. Okay, that's pretty good. Okay, that's pretty good. I love it, love it, love it. Let's talk about more. Let's talk about platforms. So as we continue our integration story, there's another update with the Google team that you may be familiar with, and that's Firebase. Firebase has been really on fire because they've had some amazing feature releases and announcements like GenKit, Firebase app hosting, and so much more. And our teams have been working together to improve the developer experience. We all know about the data story, but how can Firebase help you get your apps in front of more users? Since Angular apps can now be either client-side only or full stack with SSR, you need a deployment solution that works in both scenarios. Now, previously, you could do something like this. You could use cloud functions for Firebase to host your server-side code and then deploy your client-side code using Firebase hosting. It worked, but it wasn't ideal. And we knew we could do a better experience. So we spent time working with the engineers on Firebase to ensure that when you're using Firebase app hosting to deploy your app, you have a top-notch experience. Check this out. You can literally deploy your Angular SSR app from the Firebase console with a linked repository. And then those new rollouts come as you add commits. And guess what? You get to leverage the incredible power of the Firebase platform that's powered by Google Cloud. But you could also create backends and configure deployments using the Firebase CLI. Now, no matter which route you choose, the outcome is still the same. You can deploy updates to production by leveraging automatic rollouts. Commit a change to the configured branch, and then an automatic rollout will happen for you. So with Angular and Firebase app hosting, you are positioned to take that new app that you've been working on and share it with the world. All right, let's talk about new directions. I think you're really going to like this. We believe that AI has already changed the way that we work as developers, and what's wild is that these are early days. We don't even know how things will evolve over time. There's so much opportunity, so many cool things on the horizon. And it feels like it was just yesterday that I was in this very tent, this very room, watching my colleagues Adi Osmani and David East give a talk about AI tooling and development workflows. It feels like I was in here. I was in here. Look at that head. That's me, the same person. And I had a front row seat to experience and to learn about all the new tooling and AI features, just like you now have a front row seat to learn about what's going to happen with Angular and AI. Listen, we understand AI is too transformational for us to just force it into Angular. So we've been thinking about meaningful ways that we can we can incorporate it. So it is with much excitement. I'm so excited. Okay, I'm going to tell you. So excitement that we are launching the new AI portal, angular.dev/AI. Now, on angular.dev/AI, you'll be able to find guidance, best practices, coding examples, recipes in AI, and guess what? This is just the first version that we're launching, and we're going to continue to grow this resource. Here's an example of the type of recipe that you'll find on angular.dev/AI. Now, it's so common to want to simulate that streaming effect when you're getting a response from an LLM, that typing effect. Well, what if I told you that you could do that with Angular's resource API and a signal primitive. Let's talk about it. First, using the resource API, there's a new property called stream that you can specify on the configuration object. Stream takes an async function. Now from there, we define a signal that when it's returned, it represents the data being streamed. You can update that signal just as you would using the normal API interface. And then this is just the client-side implementation. Let's see, how do we link this to an LLM response? So on the server side, this is just an express route. We're using the Gemini API to create a content stream. Then you can stream the response to the client just using the write function on the response API. Now, for the sake of this talk, we've abbreviated this example, but I bet you could guess where you can find the completed working code. Angular.dev/AI. I appreciate that energy. All right, listen, we have links to multi-hour development sessions led by Devin and myself, walking you through integrations and implementations with tools like Firebase AI Logic and GenKit. And we've also taken care that while we are showing lots of Google AI tech, we also give guidance that is agnostic to our technology. Now, we think you're really going to like what we've done, and we can't wait for you all to check out this new part of Angular.dev. There is still so much more awesome to come. Let's pass it back over to Devin.
All right. Now that we've talked about new features, new integrations, and of course, exciting developments in AI, let's shift our focus to the future and discuss Angular's roadmap. As we progress into 2025, we remain hyper-focused on two important things: improving the Angular developer experience and improving framework performance. In the long term, we're thinking about some game-changing improvements, such as selectorless components, which could pave the way for even more exciting new features like single-file components and even incremental adoption. Near term, we're focused on delivering one of the community's most highly requested feature to enhance the signal ecosystem. So, in addition to the signal types I've already talked about today, we've also released more signals like input, output, model, and more. And yet, there's still one piece of the puzzle that's missing that I'm excited to share with you today. Signal forms. I knew you all would be excited about this one. I'm not going to give away too much just yet, but I will say signal forms will go a long way in rounding out the signal ecosystem while also making forms easier to work with in Angular. Today, we explored recently released features, new integrations, and Angular's plan for the future. Through this discussion, I hope it's clear how hyper-focused we are on developer experience and framework performance. However, I wanted to call out a theme that I noticed in looking at all these new features. Have you noticed that each of these features, they just seem to build on each other more and more? As we keep improving Angular, each change paves the way for new developer experience and performance improvements. On the new features front, I showed you how we made incredible progress rounding out the signal ecosystem, and with Zoneless moving to developer preview, we can leverage Signal's inherent state awareness to create highly performant web apps. I also shared how we strengthened Angular's SSR story with features like incremental hydration, a routing config APIs, and event replay. SSR, are you kidding me? This is awesome. And we've also been working hard to improve your developer experience by publishing a variety of authoring improvements, such as standalone components, the new let syntax, and support for untagged template literals. Mark shared a lot of exciting new integration updates, including testing improvements, a custom Angular track in the Chrome Performance panel, and new ways to supercharge your apps with the power of Firebase. Going forward, we're so excited for you to check out Angular's new AI portal that Mark shared, angular.dev/AI, so that you can learn to create AI-powered apps that your users will love. To take advantage of all of these new features we've covered today, upgrade to the latest version of Angular. And don't forget to tune in to our Angular V20 developer event on May 29th at 9 a.m. Pacific on YouTube. To everyone watching here at Shoreline and watching the live stream, I gotta tell you, don't sleep on this Angular team, because the best is yet to come. Thank you all so much.